Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight on this lovely Thursday. Glad we're able to kind of start talking about essays. Hopefully, you have a draft or two already going so that we'll be able to kind of take a look at some of the students that have already worked on things and take a look at that. Today, we have Sagrika and Grace joining us today. Sagrika, do you want to introduce yourself and then Grace?
Yeah, I'm Sagrika. I am an essay specialist for Illumin, and I have been doing this since last year, so for about a year now. And I've really enjoyed editing students' essays and working with them, and also doing these webinars. And I'm looking forward to looking through some essays with you all today.
Yeah, hi, I am Grace. I'm also an essay specialist, and I've been doing this a little bit less, but I've really enjoyed so far my time here. Previous to working as an essay specialist, I was a high school English teacher, so this is really my niche and something that I enjoy getting to do for a job.
Awesome, perfect. And for everyone who has seen our webinars before, you know that there's Q&A, there's chat. We try to get to as many questions at the end today. But I think today we'll pretty much start looking at a couple of essays that students have done well, and then we'll take a review of one student submission that was able to turn in kind of what they've gotten so far and kind of next steps and how we would kind of edit it for them as well. So, Sagar, you want to take it away? And then I'll see everyone in Q&A.
Yes. Okay, so we are going to be doing a live essay edit for webinar 5.
Yeah, so just going over what we're going to talk about today. First, we want to look at like what college essays really are, boil it down, and the basics, kind of go through the basics for you. Then we'll give you a couple of tips just of like how to create a strong essay and what admissions readers are looking for. And then what we look for in terms of like what we are targeting while we read essays, all that good stuff. And then lastly, we'll be going over one essay from a student that I think you all sent in, and then a couple of essays that are samples, essays that have been done really, really well, and we'll point out what looks good. And then lastly, we'll talk about how Illumin can help you all. I know this is a really stressful time, and so we're here to help out, and we want to kind of explain what that looks like.
Awesome. So first, like Grace mentioned, some college essays 101. There are the UC PIQs and the Common App personal statement. The other main category of essays you'll be writing are the supplemental essays. In terms of the PIQs and the personal statement though, the PIQs are much more straightforward, they're shorter, and there's 4 of them. And they are generally due November 30th. That is when the UCs tend to put their due date, is the end of November. The Common App personal statement is longer and it's more creative, and there's only 1 of them. And the due date is going to depend on what colleges you're applying to, and also whether you're applying early action or early decision, or if you're just applying on the regular cycle. So that you will have to research as you're figuring out what schools you'll be applying to.
Cool. Okay, so here's some tips that it's just a good rule of thumb to follow through on. Revise, revise, revise. Cannot stress this enough. I know it's really hard sometimes looking at your essay because you're like, oh, I just want to get it over with. Like, I don't want to look at it. I'm done with it. But it's really important to go over and really try to craft a good piece, and you want to be confident with what you wrote. So to do that, you got to go over it a few times. And then also ask other people outside of you, because after you've looked at it 15, 20 times, you might be sick of it. And so maybe asking an English teacher, a tutor, a parent, etc. Also, you got to make sure that your essay actually answers the prompt and is within the word count. So a good follow-up with this is copying and pasting your prompt right above your document before you start it, and then look back at the prompt to make sure, like, did I follow this? Check and check. And then, of course, you want to edit. So you want to edit for grammar and flow to make sure it makes sense, it's readable, it's concise. And then lastly, you just read it out loud. Like if you're just hanging out, read it, make sure it sounds good, and that will help you get on the right track.
And so what we look for as essay specialists when we're helping students edit their essays is content that really paints the student in the best light. So we are going to really work with you to make sure that the content you're presenting is actually the best content you could give to the college or the application, the admission board. We really want to give you the best version of an essay and the best version of yourself, and work on something that's not cliche or overdone, or maybe not the best example of yourself that you could give. And specifically, we look for evidence of personal growth and strong character, because those are the things that colleges are looking for. And as Grace said, when you're editing, you want to make sure you answer the prompt. And what we do is we make sure you're also going beyond that and answering why this matters. So if you're answering a prompt of what is your favorite activity, for example, for a supplemental, we will help you take that next step to also say what this says about you and why this activity is important to you. We also look for good structure and organization, a structure that makes sense and really tells your story, and an engaging writing style. Because you can have great content, but if that writing style is really falling flat, then the essay is not going to be as engaging or as interesting as it could be. And we really want to entice the reader with these essays. Okay, so first we're going to go over a model essay. So this is a previously done essay that was really strong, and we're just kind of going to go over it and talk about what it did well, and if we see anything, maybe what they can also improve on. Okay, so here's the essay. I'm just going to read it first, and then Grace and I will talk about things that stand out to us. So the prompt for this one, which is at the top, so the person could have referred back to it, is think about an academic subject that inspires you. Describe how you have furthered this interest inside and or outside of the classroom. My interest in computer science started when I took a C++ programming class and became fascinated by how I could make a computer think like a human. One of the hardest projects during the class was creating a tic-tac-toe program using artificial intelligence. The goal was to make the program unbeatable. At first, my code was messy and long, but eventually I created a slow but workable program. However, at the end, I figured out how to design a much faster program that ranked each move to find the best one. This experience inspired me to get into the USACO competitive programming to improve my new skills. One interesting problem asked me to find the correct path through a complex maze. While it was possible to solve it by hand, I instead wrote a simple algorithm that branched through the entire maze to test and find the right path out of dozens of options. Problems like this made me curious to learn more algorithms and see how they can expedite other things, such as creating a bot to automatically reply to certain emails. As I explored computer science, I began working with front-end development and took an online course named Free Code Camp that taught me HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, where I created a shuffling algorithm to randomize the placement of mines in a Minesweeper game. I later discovered that there are multiple ways to randomize a board and enjoyed trying each one to understand its benefits and drawbacks. I hope to to continue to create fun to use programs that I and others can enjoy. Computer science has allowed me to write unique programs that are innovative and helpful. I want to pursue computer science in the future to continue my passion for creating solutions to problems, whether serious issues or something just for fun, and to share it with others.
Yeah, so I think this is a great example of somebody being really articulate and kind of laying out exactly what they want to describe and express. So I think a good starting point is how the person just kind of explains like what their interest is and the origin of that very clearly. So they say, okay, my interest in computer science started here. And so we know now, like, this is the academic subject that inspires you. So it's answering the question right off the bat.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they do a great job of talking about various experiences they had that really helped them build out that interest and develop it. And I like how it is very straightforward, and because this is a UC essay, so they have a limited amount of words and they use those words well to talk about 3 different experiences that they had, which makes it very clear to the reader that this person has a lot of experience with computer science. And I like how the last paragraph also kind of goes beyond and talks about what they hope to do in the future. And it kind of shows how you don't have to have a very specific vision of exactly what your career is going to be, or even exactly what your major is going to be, as long as you can just think even broadly about what you want to do later with this academic interest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, like, I just imagine as an admissions like office and a reader of these essays, you see the same ones over and over and over and over again. And so I think being as clear as possible and giving it distinct examples like you were mentioning is something that helps to make you stand out, right, as an applicant. So yeah, I just wanted to echo a lot of that. And I think also in terms of the writing style and the flow, right, there's like really great transitions that kind of help me to follow, like, oh, okay, so here's example 1, here's example 2, here's the impact that it made. So I don't get lost in it. I just can move on from paragraph to paragraph with ease.
Yeah, I think the last thing I want to point out is that they also do a great job of being specific about what about the subject interests them, right? They say things like how I could make a computer think like a human. That's not something every computer science essay is going to say. So it helps the reader understand where they're like, what aspect of computer science is interesting to them and why they're interested in it. Like this sentence too, right? Not everyone is going to write that. Not everyone is interested in algorithms and how they can expedite different day-to-day activities. And this, right, like it's all very specific. I don't see anything like, I hope to continue to pursue computer science because I think coding is fun. That's not specific, and so I really like how specific this person gets with what aspects they like. And they connect that back to the activity that they did that made them realize.
Yeah, I have really great things to say about this one, to be honest. Yeah, as like somebody who's like, okay, I'm trying to find people who are wanting to come to my college and, are going to contribute things. Like I have a clear vision as to how this person will contribute to my college. So that makes it look pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Oops. Here we go. So now we're gonna look over a Common App essay that is also an example of one that's really strong. Do you want to read this one?
I can. Yeah, there are a few words that I think I'm going to mispronounce, so please be patient with me. But okay, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. Straight back, smiles, and let's go. Hannah strode onto the stage confidently with Ashley, Jocelyn, and I following close behind, rolling our eyes at her overly professional attitude. After all, it was just a school concert. The four of us crammed onto a bench in front of the rickety piano and prepared to play Gallup March, a quirky, lighthearted piece written for 8-hand on a single keyboard. It was about as divergent from my traditionally competitive repertoire as musically possible, but I felt far more excited and out of place. I settled into my seat and looked to Hannah for the starting cue. At age 4, facing the looming, seemingly endless sequences of black and white keys for the first time, I couldn't have imagined I would fall in love with the piano. My first instructor, Miss Doors, taught me the fundamentals. Miss Sovako used intense Russian scales and drills to push my technical mastery to a new level. Miss Kaichi there immersed me in the importance of musicality, understanding the composer's emotions, and respecting music as a higher universal language that transcends words. Their amalgamated teachings formed my diverse, nuanced playing styles, which combined with rigorous practice allowed me to pull off numerous competitive victories. At 16, I was at the top of my game. I felt invincible. Sophomore year brought that perception to an abrupt end. As Ms. Kaichai dramatically described it, only the strong remained. Competitive events were suddenly dominated by students who loved music just as much as I did, but practiced 3 times as long, choosing homeschool to maximize their preparation. My annual repertoire, always comprised of objectively difficult pieces, was now deemed average. I could no longer win, and when I practiced even harder, I still barely made the top 5. I realized the painful truth that all musicians eventually encounter. Trying your best does not equate to being the best. After becoming so obsessed with the thrill of winning, I felt lost when competition stopped going my way. Discouraged, my practice time gradually lessened, and I saw the scale gap between myself and competitors widen. I found it harder to care about music. I didn't know what to do next. Ms. Kaichachi sensed my disillusionment and suggested I spend time with other musicians my age. I'd always regarded other pianists as competition, and after so much time in solitude, I was initially uneasy opening up to others. But when I finally did, I was amazed at how immediately comfortable I felt. I realized that our shared experience led to empathy. They had been through my struggles and understood me in a way that others could not. We shared laughs for our teachers, occasional angry outbursts, the intimidating prodigy who used our most arduous competitions as his warm-ups, and our common stubbornness about practicing with the metronome. I learned to rely on them with my uncertainties and thoroughly enjoyed the feeling of community. So when my friend Hannah invited me to perform with her at a concert, what she assured me would be an entertaining, stressless piece, I couldn't have been more willing. Bang, the last Fonzo rang out a short but meaningful note that echoed 8 times across the various octaves, a perfect, enjoyable performance, just as Hannah had guaranteed. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have fun on stage, but I really wanted this feeling to stay. Over the last year, I've come to understand that being the best has nothing to do with my relationship to the piano. I could be last in every competition, but everything from the majestic melodies to the clever simplifications, from the overarching phrases to the short, sudden accents, everything about music still speaks to me. I love this language, and I always will.
Thank you. That was a long one. So I think first of all, going back to the prompt, it's pretty clear what they're sharing about, their talent is piano, and we can see why it's so meaningful to them. I think another thing that stood out to me was that especially this part where they talk about I realize the painful truth that all musicians eventually encounter. Trying your best does not equate to being the best. Um, I I thought of I saw that as like, oh, that's kind of a cliche. Like, I wonder where they're gonna take this, because that's something a lot of people learn, and it is an important lesson. But I think like I would advise against that being the main point of an essay, because many people write that essay, whether it's like from athletics or from like this one, music, or some other kind of hobby, anything that becomes competitive. This is generally a life lesson that a lot of people learn. But I think what makes this so meaningful is, first of all, they say all musicians, right? So it's like they're like acknowledging this is a universal lesson. And then they go on to really build on that and talk about how they grew from that, and talk about how they were able to rediscover their love for piano through community. And I think that is not cliche. That is a very original experience. And so that's just to say, like, think about how far you can go, right? Try not to end on like, and then I learned the lesson. Even if I work my hardest, I'm not always going to be the best, right? You want to take it beyond that and make it personal, of like, why is this meaningful to you? And how has this made you who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the student does a really great job at taking us. I like the title of it, Journey of a Skill, right? It takes us on this journey. And while I was reading it, I felt like there was actual personal development. So like one of the things, that you can try to do while you're writing these is like, are you able to bring in your reader, just like you would read, like, honestly, I felt like this is something that could be like a short story, right? Where it kind of took me from, here's like how I got really discouraged, like this epic hero journey, and then you grow into like learning these lessons, finding something even greater. So I think they take us to all of those and hope kind of make us feel the things as well along with them. So I think that was done really well. And also in terms of like some of the more, we don't always focus on stylistic things, or we sometimes, that's like one of our last steps. But I just also want to commend the dialogue and the way that it's communicated. Stylistically, it just flows great, and it does a good job with the descriptive language to again help us be brought into the journey along with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like great reflection as well. They talk about what they experienced, and throughout infuse what it meant to them and their own reflection looking back, or how they felt in the moment. Okay, awesome. Anything else, Grace, or should we move
I think
on?
we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so last one. So this one was submitted to us, and the prompt is, what is the single most significant impact you have brought to a community, and what motivated you? So this is a supplemental. Okay. Here we go. I can read this one. I am sure any attempt to locate a person who does not feel good receiving a greeting card will always come back empty-handed. After all, who doesn't feel happy to receive one with their name written neatly on an envelope, or even one over the internet? But the arrival of a greeting card takes on a whole new meaning when the recipient is a terminally sick young kid on a cold hospital bed with no visitor. There is no holiday to celebrate and nobody to talk to. A greeting card with a funny picture or message, even from an anonymous sender, could be the only distraction they have from their daily pain. I was one such anonymous sender. When I first saw a mundane-looking flyer asking for volunteers for a nonprofit serving orphan kids with terminal diseases, I applied without thinking much. Within a few days, I received a reply that I was selected. My assignment was to create holiday greeting cards in digital format. Greeting cards, I snickered. These days, aren't they simply big business of translating any and all human emotions to corporate profit? During an idyllic afternoon, I finally sat down and started making my first greeting card in years. Using my software paintbrush, I summoned the bright yellow sun and a clear blue sky, black and white cows grazing on a green pasture underneath, and red robins on the leafy tree branches. I attached a personal message wishing them the best. Once the card was complete, I paused for a moment and wondered how it would be received on the other end. Would they be surprised? Would it bring joy, even for a moment? Would they touch the bright spring colors of my card and hope for better days to come? These thoughts made me start my next card, and then the next, and then the next. Eventually, I made numerous more, each with a different, colorful picture and a personal message. The single most impact I brought to someone was a smile that I never got to witness.
Yeah. So I think first, I just like the example that this person chose for like this, seemingly kind of like quote unquote small impact, and like really showing like, okay, this is bigger than that, and kind of going through and explaining. So I think the story itself really cool, and uh, I think there's a lot you could go with it.
Yeah, I agree. It's really a creative way to answer the prompt. Um, I also I also really liked some of the imagery that they used. It was very like engaging to read. Um, I think one thing I would say to watch out for with this essay is to not um, paint yourself too much as a hero and kind of assume the experience of others that you don't know. For example, like this part, I think like it can come off a little bit like, I am helping this, person who has no one else. And you don't want to just come off as like you're doing something to like entering into a person's life to help them without recognizing that you're also benefiting and getting something out of it. Um, and so, yeah, I think just like watching out for that when writing essays, especially essays about impact or about how you've served a community. You really don't want to make it sound like I entered this community and helped these poor people who had no one. Like these people were and will continue to live lives without you, and you want to be able to recognize that and be grateful for the opportunity to be a part of their lives. Yeah, that's just one thing that I wanted to point out. But overall, I do think it is a strong essay and it definitely answers the prompt. And, um, I like, I like the little comments here and there, the little rhetorical questions. And I actually feel like I wish they could focus a little more on the end, maybe like take out this part and then just reflect more on what it meant to them and kind of talk more about how their mindset changed. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
No, I completely agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. To kind of rework it a little bit at the very end, having something just to say, because like again, the admissions counselors want to hear about you and like how you've grown from this experience. I think that's a big part of showing like just maturity and being able to reflect and all that jazz. And so if you just have something at the end to say like, although this was a great experience because like this is what it taught me, this is what helped me learn about myself. Yeah, and just kind of showcase the impact that it's made for you specifically. And then also I think there are just a few things like that, you know, once you read through it a couple times, like maybe out loud as well, there's a few places where I think wording and like, you know, simple like grammar and commas and all that could be good to add. Um, but yes, overall, I think in terms of the storytelling, it was there, right? It's just a little bit of like nitpicky things now to make it the best it can be.
Right. And that's why we suggest reading out loud, is because there were parts where maybe when you're reading in your head, you don't stumble. You're like, oh, I know what I'm trying to say. But when you read it out loud, you might stumble and realize, oh, that's not good grammar, or that's not phrased very well. So that is a big reason why we recommend that. And yeah, there were just a few little points of that. I had highlighted this sentence because this was one of those parts where it's like, it makes sense. I understand what they were trying to say. It just, I think, could be phrased a little bit more, phrased a little bit better to understand. But yeah, overall, it's definitely a solid essay. Okay. So those were the three that we have to talk about today. So we are going to do Q&A, but I think Anthony might first talk about Illumin, and then we might circle back to Q&A.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about, I mean, we'll definitely be doing a bit more essay work and things like that. I will release a poll just about a free consultation. So we're going to do a free like 30-minute check-in with one of the essay specialists on our team. And I believe like Sagarika, you're one of the folks that students might check in with just to get whether brainstorming or, hey, there's a particular prompt that's really hard for me. I want to get like some extra thoughts or feedback, right? Just to get started. So definitely feel free to let us know if we can contact you about that, right? But yeah, basically we do have this kind of curriculum to help students get started. I know a lot of students are starting school, so just making sure that they're able to kind of get an idea of like, yeah, what are the most important prompts? Which ones can I work on? Which ones will be a little bit easier for me compared to others, right? And that we're not going to be wasting time, given that time is like the most precious resource right now for our seniors, right? Just to make sure that they will not be too overwhelmed when we're getting close to deadlines, right? So, but yeah, do you want to have questions? I haven't seen anything come in, so anyone in Q&A or chat want to ask about whether just the essay process or any of the particular prompts that are a little bit tricky, right? I do want to go back, and I wanted to ask about the submitted essay, and I want to kind of bounce an idea off of you two, Sagarika, Grace, because I thought this idea like, oh, there's this concept of the anonymous sender that the student is writing about, right? And then we were also talking about like, yeah, we don't want to insert ourselves in the receiver or like the person that got the card, right? Do you think it'd be powerful to talk about like anonymous sender, anonymous receiver, or do you think that's also a little bit too vague? Or what would you think about that as like a potential theme or way to intro it, and maybe make the intro a little bit shorter?
I think that would work. I think that could tie into maybe like the concept of like, you know, how we as humans, as people, can relate to each other and connect to each other, even anonymously, right? We don't need to necessarily know who each other is to connect in that way. I think that can definitely work and be a really interesting theme to play with.
There's a potential direction to take it into. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. Questions, thoughts? We do have until 7, so I'm happy to also log off early. It's no big issue, but definitely, yeah, if there's any students, if they're kind of stuck on a particular prompt or, hey, I'm at this point in my essay, right? What would you recommend? So I guess, Sagarika, Grace, how would you, like, if you're working with a student, they're starting their essays right now, like what would be kind of the steps that you would kind of let them know, like a rough framework of like what to expect these next few weeks or months?
Yeah, so I think Illumin does a really great job with the resources that it provides. I know, especially for the student, but also for the essay specialist as well. And so there are a ton of resources in Google Classroom that we look through. So you might have a couple of like general worksheets to get the ideas brainstorming, ideas flowing first. And so that takes, a couple of days, and then we move on to outlining, and we might like have a Zoom with you and discuss the brainstorming sheets first and say, okay, these are some really good ideas. Let's hone in on one of them and then focus and, kind of get that information, put it on an outline. You work on that. You can work on it alone, or we can talk you through some of that. It's kind of up to you. Like, that's something that's really nice about this, is there's a lot of flexibility. Like, you tell us what or how you want to operate in terms of like, do you want us to just give you some edits, or do you want us to Zoom and talk you through a lot of it? Like, you give us that direction, and then we kind of do what we do and give you clear feedback to move forward. And then, so after brainstorming and outlining, then after we've worked on that, we'll go on to first draft, and that might take like a week or so. Do first draft. I normally give like first round of editing, revising, all that. We'll give you some general comments, and then we just go back and forth, right? So after the revision, we'll come back and give you some more comments, go back and, really work on that. And after 3 to 5 times of those back and forths, then you'll have a pretty great product to show for.
Question did come in. What process would you recommend for choosing the best prompt for yourself? That's actually a really good question. Make sure you pick the right prompt for what you want to talk about, right?
Yeah, so there's lots of great ways to go about it. We actually do have a worksheet specifically for that with our both the UC essays and the Common App, where we basically tell you to list all the significant experiences and activities you've done in high school, and then kind of match them to prompts that work. And so that is like a great place to start, I think, for these essays that have multiple prompts that you have to choose from. First, reflect and think about what are the most meaningful experiences I've had, and like, what do I want to say about them? And then figure out which prompt fits the best. Because, for example, with the UC essays, there's 4 of them. There's probably going to be one prompt that you could fit your topic and what you want to say into. So it's just a matter of being thoughtful so that you're not repeating yourself in multiple essays. But it comes down to brainstorming, really, and figuring out what you want to say and what question is going to help you say that.
I think another way to kind of answer that is kind of this idea, like, you should not necessarily look for the best prompt, but look for the best story you have, right? And then you kind of play a matching game to see where that fits, right? I think this is, it's really helpful as an exercise for UCs, since you do have 4 PIQs you need to answer. They're all 350 words, right? So there's some stories where you'll be able to match them to a lot of the prompts. There's some stories you may only be able to match to one, right? And understanding that priority is also important. Any other questions, thoughts? Open floor. I think what else we could discuss. We do have our supplements webinar coming up next week as well. So we have a couple more webinars coming up. We have that one. We have one about pre-med applicants. If you're interested in going in that direction, you can definitely take a look there. So supplements, I believe, will be kind of our last essay webinar. So but to kind of walk through, the why us why this college essay, and typically the why major essay, right? And for a lot of students, it's about helping them kind of adapt essays. Hopefully you already have a UC done that we can kind of wrangle around for a lot of students, right?
I think one of the biggest things to be aware of during this specific like time, like September, is it's really easy to feel overwhelmed and like, I don't want to do this. I'm busy with school. Like this feels so scary, especially like starting is always the hardest part, you know, and it's okay if you haven't started, you know, it happens. But we can really help. Like sometimes I feel like one of the biggest things that I provide to my students is that accountability of like, oh, we're meeting next week. I have to have something to show. And that can be really important. And something that I just want to emphasize, even for those of you who might not be able to do Element, really like give yourself accountability and deadlines so that you're still doing something and everything doesn't just creep up on you, because like, trust me, those deadlines are going to come up and you're not even going to realize, and it's going to be stressful. So just try to do a little bit each day.
I always try to advise students, yeah, it's not about you have a like all-nighter session, try to knock out all the essays, right? It's about doing it like 20 minutes a day, right? And it's about for when you're starting, it's about never hitting that delete or backspace button and just being able to like just put everything out there in terms of like anything you remotely think could be discussed on an essay. Couple questions. I guess people want to stick them here. Major, yeah. How would you tackle the major essay if you're applying undecided? That's a good question.
Yeah, so we have a worksheet for that, but no, I think, you know, that's a super common and understandable thing. Like when I went into undergrad, I was going in undeclared. It's basically trying to like hone in on, okay, well, what am I passionate about, right? What are my interests and things that I know how to talk about and can talk about with passion. I'm sure you have something that you're considering or thinking about. And even if there are a couple things that you're like kind of dabbling with, that's where you start, right? So you start with recognizing what your potential paths are and then be honest in that. Because again, super common to not know what the heck you're gonna do. Super common not to know what the heck you're gonna do 5-10 years down, right? But the point is that you're exploring and you're wanting to see, and you're basically able to articulate like, hey, I have these interests, I'm exploring them, we're gonna figure it out.
Let's see. Do you suggest we brainstorm on the Common App essays? How do I figure out what essay is really best for us? That's, is it kind of, sorry, I'm gonna ask a clarifying question if you're in the audience still, but I think you're asking about the, like, is it the specific prompt for the Common App essay because you only write one of the 7? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Maybe we can kind of just discuss that. Thinking like, yeah, if given for, okay, the person said yes, so I'm gonna assume I have the right interpretation of the question. So yeah, given 1 of 7 compared to like 4 of 8 for UCs, right? Is there a way to kind of tackle that Common App essay that's going to be a little bit more efficient or easier for the student?
I mean, I think a great way to go about it is to really think about what you want to talk about. And I don't think you need to like systematically go through each prompt and answer it the best. Like you wanna, I think what's more helpful is kind of what Anthony was saying earlier of thinking about what are strong stories that you have. And ideally, do you have like, you know, a couple stories that are along the same similar theme that you can tie together into this essay, because it's going to be like 600 words, so there's definitely space, and you want to write multiple stories to really create a narrative. So yeah, I don't recommend like going through each prompt and thinking about like, and trying to write a draft for each of them. I think it's better to flex.
I think similarly, to bounce off, you know, sometimes when you have so many options, it's hard to go through the options, right? Like too many options, I can't pick. So I think another strategy too, or like in addition, you can just read through and say, okay, these are the ones that I can't answer. Like I don't have a particular, you know, like X, Y, or Z. So we're just gonna cross that off, right? Because I think that will make it feel a little bit more manageable when you've narrowed it down to a few options, and then you can really focus in on those and start to come up with like a couple of ideas here and there. And then from those ideas, then I think it's a little bit easier to do the reflection.
Question around PIQs versus personal statement of like which one to tackle first. I think our general consensus is PIQs, but I guess Sayuri or Grace, can you talk about like why we generally recommend that?
Yeah, sure. I think one big reason is if you're not applying early action, PIQs are personal insight questions. They're the short essays that are for the UCs. They call them PIQs. And I think the reason we want to start with them is usually those are the ones that are due first. I think also they are you usually choose one to build on for your Common App essay.
And it's the idea, again, if you're going 4 very short essays, you get a lot of topics out of the way very quickly for students. So it's an easier way to help students organize their stories, right? I think there's this general theme of like, the prompt's not important, the story's important, right? And then we can help fit the story to the prompt. When a lot of students are like, oh, which prompt do I talk about? How do I find the right prompt for the Common App and things like that, right? It's really about finding that story first that's most impactful and then figuring out where that story fits. Let's see. Yeah, when we were doing that essay editing package or the kind of essay work, how does the essay specialist get involved in the essays? Is it just editing or is it some advice? So I guess like, Sayuri, can you talk about like maybe like a former student you work with and kind of how you're kind of working with them mechanically?
Yeah, definitely. So what it looks like is we'll have an introduction meeting. You'll tell me what your goals are, where you're at. And so I've helped students that already had drafts and just wanted help polishing them. And I've had students who had nothing. And so for a student who didn't have anything, I start with, okay, what essays do you want to do? Are you applying to the UCs? If they say yes, they're applying to the UCs, we start with that. And I basically, depending on the student, depending on what they prefer, I will either like over Zoom, talk them through, okay, what are your activities? What are you interested in academically? What do you do in your free time? Have you played any sports? Really all the questions, trying to get to know them and trying to find out what, stories and what characteristics they have that are going to be helpful for these essays. So we talk through that. I usually, as we're talking through that, we're filling out a worksheet to keep track of all the topics. And then we kind of see, okay, this seems like it could be built out into an essay. This seems like it could be built out. And usually what I'll do is I'll figure out a topic. We'll kind of think of a relatively flexible outline for that topic. And then I'll say, go write a first draft and come back to me. Depending on, like, I've had students that have come to me in like October and didn't have any PIQs yet. And so that was like, finish a first draft within 3 days and get back to me, so depending on when you come, that's going to change the timeline of how long you have to actually write and edit. So we could do asynchronous edits, like just you send me a draft, I edit it, I send it back to you on Google Docs, or we can also do Zoom editing together and writing that. So I would say we're very involved, and we do give advice on how to write it, and we also edit.
Yeah, so definitely there's like a lot of flexibility for the student just given schedules and things like that, right? But yeah, we're definitely getting in the weeds of making sure, whether early on it might be brainstorming, right? But getting into the technical of also like, yeah, these things for word choice or cutting down on word count and things like that.
Yes.
I guess we'll end with this question. This thought of, yeah, if you've got two interests or majors that you're looking at, how should you choose, or how should you find out which one should you write about when it comes to your application?
Yeah, I think I actually had this with a student recently. So I just asked her, like, which one are you more interested in? Like, which one are you more passionate about? I think that's a strong indicator. Like, there's sometimes like maybe we have more experience or more like technical experience in one area, but then like really our passion, love the cat, our passion is coming from another area. And so I think you just got to sit down, and maybe it's easiest to do a pro and con list, right? Like pro and cons of these two, which one do you have the more like engaging stories or examples, right? So I think you can take it in different ways, but just do some reflection. Like it kind of boils down to some reflection, like which one you're more interested in. And if you're like, I am dead set on both of these, like I would do a pro and con list. It's like a good tool to just say, hey, like I have both of these, but maybe I have more stories or more like hands-on experience or more details that I can add to my essay for this one. So then I'll go with that one.
Yeah, making sure it all comes back to stories, right? Of thinking like, yeah, what are you able to write that's more comfortable, or you have more examples. Okay, I think we'll leave it here today. So again, it's definitely this idea. We'll have a couple more webinars discussing topics and things like that. We actually will also do an in-person event. If you're in the Bay Area, you can mark your calendar for September 9th at 5 p.m. We should have an email out soon to sign up for that as well. It'll be at a bubble tea shop, and we'll just talk and be able to kind of discuss a little bit of what we're seeing for admissions. So I'll put the link one more time. We can definitely put a free consultation in, or you can sign up for our essay consulting, right? But definitely we hope to see you at another event. And Sire here, Grace, thanks for joining us today. See you, everyone. Bye.